My name is Defne Arslan. I am Senior Director of the Atlantic Council Turkey programs back in Washington, D.C. We also have an office in Turkey, and I'm proud to have moderating this panel with distinguished speakers today. So if I may go through one by one. So we are hosting today Deputy Minister of Energy in the Ministry of Environment and Energy, Hellenic Republic, Mr. Nikos Tsafos. Tsafos. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and we are hosting Konstantinos Mavros, CEO of PPC Renewables. And you can all find the bios on the app or web page, so I'm not going through this, but most of them are all of them are very famous and distinguished speakers, so no need for further introduction. And Professor Dr. Karen Pittel, Director of IFEO Center for Energy, Climate and Resources. She's professor in economics in University of Munich, so welcome. And Ambassador Geoffrey Pyatt. So this has been quite regular between us. I keep moderating your panels recently, and it's an honor. Ambassador Pyatt, no need for introduction, especially in Greece. Former Assistant Secretary of State for Energy Resources. He recently also joined the Atlantic Council. It's an honor to have him in our team as a distinguished fellow in the Global Energy Center. And he's also has become recently Senior Managing Director, Energy and Critical Minerals at McClarty Associates. So I'd like to welcome all of them again. We only have 40 minutes. I'm also waiting for the timer to be set. I think we have 40 minutes to talk about lots of things today. So we have as you may have seen, we have a very twisting and panel's name, Energy Security in Changing Climate. So are we actually talking about climate change or changing climate? So I think it's both ways, so depends on interpretation today. But I really like to, just set the tone with a couple of notes on my end. This is a very interesting era because the U.S. administration now changed a lot of things for the globe. It's not only for Europe. Everything is a disruptive time for everyone. So all the governments are working on setting new policies, not only in the energy sector but in everything. And energy security in changing climate will be very, very again, on the top of the agenda for all of us. So in this environment, shall we be able to, moving from fossil fuel-based system to renewables again, while the current US government is, they already announced that they are keen on keeping the fossil fuels, again, back on the table. How will this be, reflect on energy transition globally? Shall we be able to secure available, affordable, and sustainable energy, bottom line energy security, again, in such an environment? So we will discuss a lot. If I may, I would like to set the tone, giving the floor first Ambassador Pyatt, who just literally arrived from the US and rushed to our panel. So Ambassador Pyatt, welcome again to Delphi. It's an honor to have you here. So I'd like to start with, of course, the Trump administration has spoken a lot about the American energy dominance, which seems underpinned by expanding U.S. energy exports, especially U.S. LNG. What implications does that have for energy security in Europe, and how this will affect the energy transition and also climate goals overall, the new policies? And can you broaden the nexus as well of, just under the regional energy cooperation and growing the role of U.S. companies in the region as well? And so let's start with that, and we will continue with our guests.
Great. Well, thank you, Defne. It's great to be back in Delphi, and especially to focus on this topic. I want to start with just enormous congratulations to my friend and colleague, Nikos Tsafos. I don't think there's a more technically qualified deputy energy minister anywhere in the European Union. But I think his appointment really captures something, which is the degree to which Greece has become an international and certainly European leader on the dual issues of energy security and energy transition. I've just finished up about 3 years as President Biden's chief energy diplomat. And in that context, it was very clear to us that the world is going through a fundamental transition in terms of how energy is delivered, but that our traditional energy resources will also be central. The Trump administration, as you note, has doubled down on U.S. fossil energy production, but it's worth bearing in mind. In the last month of the Biden administration, the United States produced more crude oil than any other country in the history of the world, 13.5 million barrels a day, more than Saudi Arabia and Iraq together. We also, of course, are the world's unrivaled largest LNG producer. Gas liquefaction capacity in the United States will double by 2030, and we're going to have this status as a traditional energy superpower as long as you can see out into the future. But at the same time, we're also growing our renewables sector. It's worth bearing in mind, the United States last year deployed more renewables onto our grid than any year before. And really importantly, if you look to the future, current permits for interconnection in the United States are 97% clean. So 97% of the interconnection that is pending in the US right now is wind, solar, and battery storage. Let me talk for a second about Greece. It was incredibly exciting for me driving up to Delphi an hour ago or less to see all the new solar deployment, a lot more wind. Greece is really walking the talk in terms of the energy transition. But at the same time, and I'm enormously proud of the work that happened on my watch, which George Souness was able to continue, we have built a thriving relationship around our gas trade. So Alexandroupoli is now online. Maria Rita is here, and you can look at how important the Southern Gas Corridor and TAP have become to European energy security. A lot of the cargoes coming into Revithoussa, coming into Alexandroupoli, are now originating from the Gulf Coast of the United States. So that is a contributor to the US-Greece trade relationship, something that Prime Minister Mitsotakis talked about in his Breitbart interview yesterday, which is getting a lot of attention. The last point I would make, and it's great to be here with Konstantinos as well, I remember in one of my first Delphis, which was probably 2014 or so, I talked with Tom Ellis about the vision that I was advancing as ambassador for really building a wider regional partnership between the United States and Greece, leveraging Greece's influence in the Western Balkans, in the Black Sea region. That was a notion in 2014. Today it's a reality, and PPC embodies that, and especially PPC Renewables. If you look at how ambitiously PPC is building out their relationships in Bulgaria, in Romania. Earlier this week in Washington, I was meeting with the CEO of the largest private power company in Ukraine, DTEK. DTEK is very, very focused on their strategic relationship with PPC, wanting to work with PPC on battery storage, on renewables, but also on traditional energy. And the last point I would make is that this lot wider Greek role projects not just to the north through the Western Balkans up to Ukraine, but also into the Eastern Mediterranean. It's incredibly exciting for me to see the growth of the relationship, especially with ExxonMobil and Chevron, the progress that's being made by the Kopalouzos Group with their Gregi project, which the United States, through repeated administrations, has supported, but also the Prime Minister, and I know this is probably the first thing on Minister Tsafos' to-do list, the Prime Minister's determination to see that the relationship with Chevron and Exxon continues to flourish as those companies, those super major companies, look at potential investments of billions of dollars in the Eastern Mediterranean, building on what's already an enormous Chevron presence, especially in Cyprus, in Egypt, and in Israel. So very exciting stuff. Delighted again to be back here, but especially so pleased to be up here with Greek colleagues who are really setting the tone for all of the European Union on a relationship, and I know we're in a difficult period in the transatlantic conversation, but a relationship on energy and energy security in particular that is completely complementary, where the United States and our NATO allies should be each other's greatest partners on energy, where we have a similar interest. Just down the mountain from us, you can see the Metalen facility, and I was incredibly excited to see the news about Metalen's new work with the European Commission on gallium. Gallium is one of the strategic minerals on which China recently placed export controls. I spent years warning about the risks of our dependence on China for key critical minerals. I was in Tokyo in December. The Japanese are deeply, deeply concerned about China's new controls on gallium. The Metalen facility down the hill from us towards Galaxity can fill all of Europe's requirements for gallium. And it's a perfect example of the kind of strategic investment that we're going to need if we're going to continue to progress in our energy transition, if we're going to deliver the energy security that our citizens and our companies demand, and if we are going to meet the climate goals, which are so urgent if we're to maintain a livable planet.
Thank you, Ambassador Pyatt. I have follow-up question, but I will leave to the second turn. So I'm planning to do 2 runs with my guests. If I may, I will have the liberty to move to actually Deputy Minister Tsafos, from Ambassador Pyatt, just to make the connection where he ended, especially, regional cooperation. Could you talk about the importance of regional cooperation in Greece's energy strategy? And by the way, as a Turk, it's an interesting combination that we are, making here. How does Greece approach the issues of energy security and the energy transition, especially if do you see any 2 imperatives as intention or complementary to each other, with the given environment? And then maybe if you can touch base a bit more, just Greece's role in regional integration, as well as just to, follow up where Ambassador Pyatt left. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question. And thank you, Ambassador Pyatt, for the very kind comments. I think I'm going to invite you to sit on every panel that I ever go to. Let me begin from a view of energy security in Greece before I zoom out and look at the region. When the world is changing dramatically, you can spend a lot of time thinking about what's changing, or you can spend some time thinking about what's not changing. And so for me, when I look at our energy security picture, I see a country that is trying to lean into its resource endowments and competitive advantage. So what does this mean? Number 1 is the sun and wind that we have in Greece. We've been incredibly successful at deploying wind and solar in this country. We've gone to the point where about 45% of our generation last year is wind and solar. You add hydro to that, you get to 55-60%. On wind and solar, this penetration is one of the highest in Europe and one of the highest in the world. And we're just getting started. The investment interest is multiple times greater than what we have deployed so far. And in fact, we are producing so much renewable energy that last year, not just on renewables, but from other sources as well, we became a net electricity exporter for the first time since the year 2000. So that's one. The second thing is hydrocarbons. We're a country that believes in a realistic transition, not driven by dogma, but driven by sort of what we think is achievable. So we've had an active exploration program in this country. That program got a real leg up in 2022 after Prime Minister Mitsotakis said, whatever you're doing here, let's move much faster. And one of the results of that is that we've had an expression of interest by Chevron to come in and engage in exploration. To us, that is a vote of confidence on multiple levels, politically, economically, but also geologically. Companies don't go places if they don't think they'll find something. And it's called exploration for a reason. If we knew it, we wouldn't call it exploration. So we always have to be reserved about what we say. But the fact that a major company looks at the data and says, I like what I see, I want to spend more time here, that is an incredible vote of confidence. And in our strategic view, Greece is going to need gas, Europe is going to need gas, and if we can produce this gas here, why not? So we are having an incredibly pragmatic approach towards hydrocarbons. If I step back on the regional role, I think we have to see it on 3 or 4 different levels. First, we don't talk about this very much. We're a major exporter of oil products, so we bring crude oil in the country. If you look at our refineries, most of what they produce is actually exported. It's exported to the region. On natural gas, most of the gas that comes into the country leaves the country onward to somewhere else, either onward to Italy or to Bulgaria and other countries. We have infrastructure, the old stuff and the new stuff, that serves regional markets, whether that is the Revithousa facility, the Alexandroupolis FSRU, the interconnector between Greece and Bulgaria. And we are sort of big believers in acting as a conduit for gas that comes to Greece to reach third countries via Greece. And we will continue to support that, the development of this corridor as needed. At the same time, we're also putting a huge emphasis on electricity interconnectors. We are connected with most of our neighbors. We have a cable with Italy, Albania, North Macedonia, 2 with Bulgaria and 1 with Turkey. So we're trying to see where we can expand these interconnectors. This is for reasons of energy security. It's also because, as I said before, we've become a net exporter. So we have our producer hat on, and we're thinking, where can I sell my product? But also one of the things we've learned is that interconnectors are vital to balance renewables. If you look at how we balance renewables in Greece today, the #1 way is interconnectors. We export when we have a lot of wind. We import when we don't have a lot of wind, right? So there are multiple layers of rationale for us to have more interconnectors. And at the same time, we also realize the reality of geography. There is a vibrant trade in hydrocarbons between North Africa and Europe. We have 4 natural gas pipelines that come from Algeria and Libya that go into southern Europe. And I am absolutely convinced that we're going to have 4 electricity cables over time that connect North Africa to South Europe across North Africa. And why not have this trade extend to hydrogen and other products, carbon capture, sort of trading CO2. So we see an enormous potential in acting not just as an exporter, but also as a vehicle for resources that belong to others. And as part of that, of course, is also our connection with Cyprus to complete the internal market and end the isolation of Cyprus and enable their transition to net zero. So, everything we do has a regional dimension to it. And the reality is that we thrive when we can align our strategy in a broader geographical context. It's just that this context is oil, gas, electricity, our electricity, other people's electricity, hydrogen, CO2. It's a multi-fuel, multi-technology. And so we see enormous opportunities to essentially play a role that develops our resources, but also channels these resources and the resources of others for the good of the region.
Deputy Minister Tsafos, thank you very much. I will ask a very quick follow-up question to your first round of reply. Thank you for, first of all, summarizing and the projects that you are focusing on. Given the changing market environment, how the new pricing mechanisms will affect your project priorities?
Yeah, I mean, when I think about, if you're thinking about pricing, I mean, we have essentially what we've seen so far is, the price of oil is coming down a little bit. That's helpful for a country that doesn't produce oil. The price of gas is coming down. That's helpful because gas itself is a fuel you use, but also it affects the price of electricity. And we've also seen the price of electricity come down. I would say the number one thing that is keeping us up at night with the minister is how to lower the price of electricity and the burden of energy for consumers and for businesses. And so for that, we have, again, multiple levels that we're addressing. trying to get the market to work better, trying to get some of the European inefficiencies and gaps that we see in the European market, trying to close those. That requires a European effort, but also looking at the cost within Greece, because you have a cost of energy that is at the wholesale market, but then the consumer pays a bunch of other stuff as well. So trying to hit those other costs. So, but as a historical importer of energy, we see the energy transition as a way to deliver lower prices. You know, I always like to use this number. Greece, historically, if you look at the last 15 years, we spent about 1 billion euros a year importing natural gas. That's the average over sort of a 10-year period. In 2022, that 1 billion became 7.4 billion. 7.4 billion in an economy that is, 200 billion, give or take, depending on the year. That is a huge shift. So for us, we see that reducing our exposure to this kind of volatility and using resources that we have in the country is one of the ways that we can protect consumers and businesses from price shocks, recognizing that, of course, we're part of an interconnected market, and so the prices of energy here are tied to what happens in other countries as well.
Thank you very much. I think it's a good time to move to Mr. Mavros. And PPC is the leading electricity producer and supplier in Greece. Your recent company strategy includes growth driven by RES and decarbonization and integrated business model and expansion in Southeast Europe as well, and Ambassador Pyatt also summarized some of them. How important and significant for advancing the energy transition is integrating and connecting regional energy markets, especially if you may refer at our panel title. Could you please expand the role of PPC in this environment and in Greece and also the region? Thank you.
Absolutely. Having heard a real friend of Greece describing what's going on here, and you have played a very, very, very significant role all these years, I'd like to zoom out from all of this and just say that living in an era of a real geo-disruption, we are looking in three pillars that we need to actually view, tackle, and work upon. One would be the gigapower game. We can see what's going on around us at the moment. The other would be the gigawatt game, the energy part, and of course the gigabyte part of it, because gigabytes, the AI, data centers and all this will be increasing demand, and this will be driving the energy game in the near future. Going back to the gigapowers, I just want to mention three numbers here to try to explain, and I was thinking how to explain what's going on. The European Union, or Europe, the extended Europe as a whole, has a 58% dependency on energy. China has 20% dependency, and the United States, 0. So someone can understand how important it is for the European Union to work together as a cluster, zoom out, not work only on a country level, and make sure to tackle the changing climate on energy and the need for autonomy. So this is the main driver, and Minister Tsafos, I think, explained very well the way we should look at things, looking not only on renewables, not only on fossil fuels, but on capacity building in the European Union. So in PPC, we are the incumbent, and we are working in the Southeastern European cluster, having worked and producing electricity at the moment in Romania, Bulgaria, Italy, and we are about to move into new territories. We view this cluster as a very important one in the European Union. And of course, because of the existence of the vertical corridor that, it's a very important notion and a very important work for the European autonomy, security of the region. So we play our part, we play our role. We are working, and we are going to be working in 6 territories, 6 states, 6 countries. At the moment, we have a client base of 8.8 million customers. We have a capacity of 12.4 gigawatts, out of which 50% is renewables. So we have been doing our part of the Green Deal, and we are operating a regulated asset base of 5 billion for the distribution network. So we are working in 3 pillars in those geographies. Again, the 3-pillar part. One would be the Green Deal, our own Green Deal. So we are transforming, and we have been transforming to a green utility, and then, as I'm going to explain, to a power tech. The second would be distribution networks, because this is the way to move forward and make sure that all the different territories interact, and of course the customer centricity to provide value-added services to our customer base. Now, what would be the real challenge for our strategy going forward? And this is something we exchanged with Ambassador. I'd like to share this, if you allow me, the battery thing. So at the moment, batteries are starting in Europe. It is estimated that by 2030, we will have 180 gigawatts of battery storage systems in the European Union. So I will quote it the way we discussed it. It's the new Nord Stream. This is what it is for Europe, the battery systems coming up. And this is very important to us in our strategy being deployed in these territories. So we are not working only for the green transition, we are working to actually build capacity and serve the demand that will be arising from the AI data centers and other relevant technologies. And this is what we recently announced, and what we did is that we view an opportunity, and this relates also to the transatlantic relationships between Europe and the States, that all these machines, all the AI thirst that is out there has a need for data center deployment. And this is what we are going to do, coming from the Green Deal, moving to the technology part of the world, becoming a leading power tech for Europe.
Thank you very much. Actually, you are right, and this is something that Ambassador Pyatt also, just shared before our panel. Indeed, energy storage is becoming the new power play for Europe, and you are playing, as in your company, playing an important role there. And from you, Mr. Mavros, I'd like to move to Dr. Pittel to get more, an economist perspective to all going on, and also, more general, broader European and some maybe Germany perspective from you. So progress on international climate negotiations, is expected to slow down given the environment. So in this new era, what we can expect is less U.S. leadership than in the past, but do we need a U.S. leadership also? It will be the next question. Maybe if you can talk about the geopolitical context and how this may affect international cooperation on energy, climate issues, and also how this will affect on the markets. And also from economics of scale point of view, so let's get your view as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you also for the invitation. I think it's a great conference. I'm here the first time, and I'm learning a lot, and so mission accomplished. The question, what an economist can say to the recent developments, I think that's limited, because not all is driven really by economics, what we're seeing at the moment. The statement I didn't want to make, but might be appropriate. Now, with respect to, I'm a climate economist and energy economist. So for me, of course, developments in the context also of climate are important. And what we do see at the moment is, of course, that it's more or less dropping from the international agenda. What does it mean for energy? I think the transition and the transformation to renewable energy, to decarbonization, it's not necessarily driven by climate change anymore. What you see is a changing narrative that actually renewables are good for driving prices down, as you mentioned, with respect to electricity, with respect to reducing dependence, for example, strategically on fossil fuel markets, which tend to be kind of volatile. And I think those are really important aspects. So I'm worried about the climate and the broader climate policy. I'm less worried about the focus on energy, because I think the developments that we see at the moment actually increase the focus on energy and on energy security. Now, of course, if we go forward, also as Europe, we will not be energy independent. I think that's sometimes a notion, if we do this enough and that enough, then we will be completely autark or self-sufficient. I don't think that's really the way to go, and I don't think we will or should actually achieve that. But what we want to have is more autonomy. So having more diverse sources, being able to basically not dictate the direction, but having concrete influence in which direction, where we actually are sourcing our materials. Now, having said that, I'm seeing a number of issues that might arise in the future with respect to energy security. I mean, one thing we already addressed a little bit is natural gas. The IEA basically sees that there is a gas glut coming because of all the investment that were undertaken after the energy crisis. And if you look at the import of the EU with respect to natural gas, the share of the US has increased a lot. I mean, so about almost 50% of our LNG imports are coming from the US at the moment. At the same time, Europe is also the most important exporter for the US with respect to LNG, which should, in economic terms, say, okay, this is a mutual win-win situation, which we thought about Russia, of course, as well. So to me, this is a good question, how the European Union is going to actually view this high dependency of with respect to natural gas in the light of the current developments. Is that really a safe option? Should we also discuss scenarios where, for example, the US is not delivering anymore, where there's also attacks on our interconnectors, for example, to Norway, where Norway is at the moment the most important source of natural gas. So I think this energy security aspect has to be broadened up. Usually we focus on very few aspects with respect to the resilience of our energy systems, and I think that changed a lot. So it's much broader now, and it has to be taken broader now. So that's basically natural gas. That also kind of course, addresses the issue, where's our hydrogen going to come from? I think the focus that we try to do a lot in Europe, especially in countries like Greece, where you have the potential also for renewables and for then the production of hydrogen is very important, but we're also going to be importing from outside of Europe. So we should avoid making the same mistakes that we did, for example, especially Germany, with respect to natural gas dependency on very few sources. That kind of brings me to one more issue that I wanted to address in this context, and that's the question of raw materials. I mean, we're talking about energy as if it's only hydrocarbons and installed capacity of wind and installed capacity of solar, installed capacity of storage, but in order to get that capacity, you need a lot of raw materials. And China is dominating that raw materials, critical raw materials market to a very large degree with respect to raw, unprocessed materials, but even more with respect to processed materials. So what I'm expecting in the future is the race about resources on natural critical materials to really pick up even more. I mean, so far it's been, on the one hand, China, and it's been the US, it's been Europe, but I think the US is going to enter much more aggressively in the future. I mean, if you look at what's happening with respect to the agreement with the Ukraine, could be taken as a first step in that direction, but if I were the US, I would try to get much more independent from China in the situation as it is right now. So meeting on the international market with respect to resources is going to play a much bigger role in the future. And there we see different systems. I don't think the EU is really successful at the moment in securing or in being successful in that race and securing the reserves. So far, China is much better in basically saying they want to invest, while Europe is often talking about where we're going to invest. We're foreseeing more investment. We're having strategic plans, strategic relationships, bilateral agreements with countries, but investment doesn't follow at the same pace. So I think Europe really has to step up their game there. And then also that raises, of course, the question, if you read the documents on the EU level with respect to raw materials, as one example, is of course, we want to do it the European way. You want to do it sustainable with respect to human rights, with respect to the environment, which I think is very, very important. But we do it in a way that's not really pragmatic. We're doing it in a way that makes things very complicated and slows things very much down. So I think we have to find a new approach in combining, on the one hand, our expectations to what we want to also achieve in other countries with respect to beyond the pure delivery of raw materials, but at the same time also deal with the situation where there's different systems of FDI meeting each other's on the market. So I think there is still room for discussion on energy security and also really also threats. I mean, so far it was all very positive, so I'm kind of throwing the negative note in here.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you very much. Quickly, given our time limitation, I'd like to turn to Ambassador Pyatt. Ambassador Pyatt, if I may, I really like to comment on the role that Greece and Turkey can play together in the region. It is, according to me, not because I'm originally Turkish American, but it's not realistic to talk about a real, energy solution without actually Greeks and Turkey working together. So, please, could you elaborate that topic and how we will address this changing climate and climate change, supporting the cooperation between Turkey and Greece? Thank you.
Sure. So I'll say a couple of quick things. One, I think it's very clear to anybody looking at Europe from Washington that Europe's geopolitical center of gravity is shifting to the south and east. That's partially a result of the war in Ukraine, Russia's invasion. It's partially a result of what's happening in what happened with the Hamas terrorist attack on Israel, the dramatic shifts that are taking place in the Gulf. Greece and Turkey are both right in the middle of that. As the person who was the U.S. ambassador in Greece in the summer of 2020, when the crisis over the Oryx race happened, I think it's a great accomplishment that the relationship today is being managed effectively and directly between the two governments. And I think that is one of the things that contributes to the interest from a company like Chevron. I see also in the audience my friend Osama Mavros from Cairo, from the East Med Gas Forum. Chevron has a decades-long history, very strong commercial presence in Egypt, in Israel, working also with the Jordanians and hopefully in the future with Cyprus. But the possibility of building a larger architecture that stretches into the European Union. I would also note that just as Greece has made dramatic progress in building out its role in helping to create resilience in Europe's energy grid through Alexandropoli, Revithusa, IGB, Southern Gas Corridor, Turkey has been involved in some of the same. Turkey has significantly built up its regasification capacity. Very importantly, Turkey this year will have to make a decision on how to handle its long-term contract with Gazprom, which expires. So I think the fact that there is this positive dialogue, especially directly between the two capitals, is a larger signal of confidence. But I also think as we look to the future, there is much more possibility for deeper regional cooperation, as all of us have talked about, whether it's through the vertical corridor, whether it's through bringing clean electrons from Egypt up through Greece into the European grid, or more projects like the Southern Gas Corridor, which of course depends completely on the cooperation between BOTAŞ in Turkey and the TAP pipeline, which brings those molecules onward to Italy.
Thank you. So, Deputy Minister, would you like to comment on that, or just? And I also would like you to elaborate a bit more on the, the projects that you are, undertaking in the region, And do you want to comment on the regional cooperation possibilities, just how the dialogue is going and how this can actually enhance the European energy security in this environment?
Yeah, I mean, for us, I think I finished my earlier statement saying that our national strategy
Yes.
is embedded in a regional context, right? So we see opportunities to collaborate with our neighbors, across the board on oil, on natural gas. We've still have a lot of work to do on natural gas. I think, we're looking at strengthening the vertical corridor where there are still some barriers before gas can flow freely north and into Central Europe. We also, of course, have past announcements about bringing more gas from the Caspian into the European market. So that's always part of the equation that we're thinking about. And then on electricity, I talked a little bit about sort of the look south and southeast, as you look at the East Med and North Africa. But for us, that strategy is directly tied to our efforts to increase our export capacity further north, right? Because bringing more electricity into Greece, if you don't have a way to move that electricity from Greece into other countries, will create a challenge for us. So we have a cable with Italy that we're essentially trying to triple the capacity of that cable. We've put on the table a plan to essentially build a cable through the Adriatic to reach into Central Europe. We're in constant discussions with other neighbors to see what opportunities there might be for more interconnection. And one of the things that I think we really learned last year, especially during the summer when we had very high prices in the region, is we learned the cost of not having sufficient interconnection. We learned that having a cable that could carry a lot more but is not able to, that has a huge cost. And so one of the general themes that we've put on the table and we try to articulate in Europe is that cross-border capacity across all technologies, but particularly in electricity, is something that we should see strategically, and it is also something that possibly makes sense to sort of overbuild, because when you reach those points where one market sits on the one side and the other market sits on the other side, the price divergence can be enormous. And so trying to figure out, how do we deploy the capital needed to reduce the disparities between prices in electricity in particular, that is one of the areas that is of very high priority for us.
Thank you. We have been warned that we are running out of time, so very quickly, I'd like to...
A very quick comment, 20 seconds.
Yeah,
Maybe.
so please...
Yeah, just two things. One is zooming into Greece. Greece is becoming a local superpower. We are already there. We should take into consideration, interconnections and the vertical corridor along with all technologies. And this is the second point. We are not talking about renewables or natural gas or batteries. Everything is needed in the mix. And this is the way putting Greece more in the map, becoming a local superpower, and European Union to play its role globally. That's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you. And Karen, so if you want to, wrap up the, just what additional role EU should play, in this new era, to meet the climate change and also in a changing climate. So and then we will, if we may have time, we may leave the floor to one question, but so I will leave that to just panelists, the audience. So.
Yeah, basically, I was prepared to say a lot about Europe's role in the global energy transition, etc. I think we don't have the time, but perhaps one thing. I think the focus of the discussion was very much internal, European, internal, and even regional to the southeast. But I think what was said regarding the interconnection, the integration of the renewables into the existing energy system, that is absolutely key. Also developing a more European, pan-European cooperation, but also regulation with respect to support of renewables, for example. That's very much national still. And if we don't get our stuff together and actually work together in leveraging what we have in Europe with respect to the potential of solar, with respect of the potential of wind, also resources, although that's going to be very, very difficult because of acceptance issues. I think we have to focus much more in how we get things done and how we get things done together. And we don't have really a good legacy in the last years in at least some regions of Europe where the focus is very much internal. I mean, if you look at the trillion euros that Germany wants to have for infrastructure and for military, that's all national thinking. That's not European thinking. So I think we have to really overcome that.